happening. The lengths I went through to get my hands on this book has put me through unmatched levels of stress that I haven't felt for a long time. That's not related to work. I love that for us. You might be asking yourself, Jenny, why didn't you just go buy the actual copy of the book? And I truly considered it. I have been to 2 bookstores in the past week just to hold this book in my hands and decide whether I should sacrifice my values of hating hardcover books. I just really don't enjoy the reading experience. So the part where I suffer is for new releases. I usually have to wait an extra year for the paperback to come out before I can add it to my collection. Instead, I spent every waking moment of the past 3 or 4 days. It's Friday and this book came out on Tuesday, just on the Libby and Overdrive app. I was living on that app. On my lunch breaks, after work, first thing in the morning, last thing at night, I was just refreshing and checking all the different libraries where I either have a library card or my library partners with them. So I had like 6 libraries or something. Because I was doing this on my lunch breaks and after work only, I kept missing time slots. So I was able to get on like 4 or 5 hold lists, but all for several months each. So it was insanity. I was really getting stressed. I really want to read this book really, really badly. So many reallys. This morning, the fates aligned. Somehow, I think my own personal like local library got more copies of the ebook. So we woke up to the notification that the hold was ready for me. So 3-4 days of intense pressure and stress, and I am now holding the ebook in my hands for Sunrise on the Reaping by Suzanne Collins, the new Hunger Games book. I'm also really glad to get this in my hands sooner rather than later because according to Connie, spoilers are already coming out and she's already seen the epilogue of this book. I am very, very anti-spoilers, so she luckily did not share anything with me. All I know is apparently I should look forward to the dedication from Suzanne Collins at the start of the book, and also I have seen one clip on my Instagram before scrolling really quickly of Hannah from Clockwork Reader sobbing while reading this book. So we love that for us. Nothing could hold me back from reading it. I am both so excited and also dreading because I don't think there's anything in me that would be like, yeah, haymitch's story must be fun. No, I am dreading it. I am going to feel so bad for this man. I am scared for myself. I am sad for him, even though he's a fictional character. He is very real in my mind. I'm ready to suffer. And honestly, the world does need a new Hunger Games book in the current state of things. So this is going to be a very relevant read, sadly. Haha. All that aside, I did do just like a review for the last new release video I covered with Deep End by Ali Hazelwood, but it's spring, the sun is out. I'm feeling very fresh and fun, and seasonal depression is slowly easing off, and I really want to create a little reading vlog. So I hope you'll enjoy following me along this journey of probably intense heartbreak. Let's get started. Time to debrief a little. I'm only 5% of the way through, but there's already so many thoughts flowing around in my head, so I just want to get it all out there. I stopped right before the reaping is officially going to begin. So I'm actually going to try my best to avoid spoilers through this whole reading vlog and talk about things as ambiguously as possible. However, I think fair game for what I've read up until now. So if you want absolutely no spoilers, I would recommend skipping this part and moving forward, but this is like all things you can grasp from the first few pages of this book, so it's not even fully complete for chapter 1 yet. Okay, initial thoughts. The beginning already breaks my heart. It is immediately bringing you into the life and childhood of Haymitch. You're introduced to his family, so his single mother and his little brother. You're also introduced to his girlfriend. I believe we would pronounce her name Lenore Dove. You're introduced to a few of his friends and just like general childhood kind of, I'm gonna say mutual friends or just people you go to school with and you know around town. Immediately, that's just like already very sad because we all know what happens to Haymitch. You know, it's all building up to what happened to make him so utterly alone, sad, and just like this tragic sort of mentor character in the main Hunger Games timeline. I also love the little tidbit that is slipped in about Lenore Dove and how her name originates from the term gray, and this is directly a reference to Lucy Gray Baird. I love how these characters continue to intertwine. I love that we see Haymitch's childhood in District 12 really replicate a lot of portions of Katniss's childhood in District 12 as well, and then we get that element of Lucy Gray Baird from Coriolanus Snow's youth, and like how Lucy Gray Baird is a key character in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. All of it is really tying together wonderfully into this tragic universe. There's just so many predictions running around in my head. We all know Haymitch ends up in the Quarter Quell Hunger Games, but the reasons on how it happens is just like I'm dreading it. Obviously the easy one is going to be that his name simply gets selected, but with each name that they introduce, where there's not many, right? There's his brother who is not eligible, we have his girlfriend and one of his best friends, and then we have a few other people around the town that he kind of points out. Some are relatively generous and giving people, and some you hear a little bit more negatively about, but really there's not too many names that are being shared. So with each extra name that's being shared for someone who's like between I think the ages of 12 and 18, it does make me nervous understanding that there's going to be 4 of these District 12 kids who are going to be chosen for this game rather than the usual 2. Is Haymitch going to be chosen? Is his friend going to be chosen? Is his girlfriend going to be chosen? And if his girlfriend's chosen, can he volunteer? I don't think he can, because I think it has to be like 2 guys and 2 girls. So can it work? I don't know. So there's so many possibilities of who he's going to end up in the games with, you know, and obviously who might die alongside him. Will he have to kill any of his friends? It's all just like swirling around. I am very nervous. Already I'm just like highlighting things here and there. Right off the bat, I showed this a bit in my kind of reading portion as well. There's foreshadowing that just goes into understanding the background of the Hunger Games universe. Haymitch is given kind of his first bottle of alcohol and he thinks, who would drink this? I don't drink this. I'm just gonna go sell it. And knowing that his canon character ends up becoming very heavily reliant on alcohol is like a very sad kind of tidbit that Suzanne Collins has layered in to break all of our hearts. I also thought it was really fun how she slipped in a little tidbit of Lenore giving Haymitch his birthday gift and how it is a direct reference to actually the symbol that is on the front of the cover. So this little like flint, I forget what they call it, like a flint striker or something that has the snake and the bird, which I also think is a wonderful callback to the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. And I wonder how all of this is going to play into things in the future in the story. Knowing that it's a symbol of the book, I assume that this little gift becomes quite symbolic to him as he goes on his journey into the Hunger Games. All of that aside, I'm going to keep reading and I'm going to be sad, and you can all come along. From here on out, I'm not going to say too much more about the specifics because I really would like it to be a surprise for any of you who have not had the chance to read the book, much like I wouldn't have if I didn't get lucky this morning with the library. So everything else after this will just be feelings and vibes and just general thoughts and reviews. And now I must continue because I cannot stop reading. Good morning, you are in my mirror again. I'm heading to an early shift for my volunteering place, so to recap what I've read, you're just gonna have to get ready with me. So that's what we're doing today. I have powered through this book. I am stunned by the progress I've made. I think I was up so late last night, and honestly, that's what I blame for. You can probably see I'm literally breaking out. I slept late, but that's the power of Suzanne Collins, and we're just gonna accept that, and it's a good review for the book. So far the Hunger Games games have not yet started. Okay, I'm blind. I need to wear my glasses. I think the big thing is that this book, my initial thoughts, is that it's actually quite a lot more nostalgic of reading the original Hunger Games trilogy for the first time, and especially the first book, than Snow's book was. So obviously, like Snow's book, he's in a very different role. He is literally from the capital, and he's a mentor for one of the Hunger Games champions? I forget if that's what they're called, which is crazy because I've been reading this book for hours last night. Tributes, there we go. Because Haymitch is a tribute, and he's a tribute from District 12, and he's kind of just experiencing the prep leading up to the Hunger Games, like, you know, the chariot ride, styling, the training, the mentorships, all of that. It is actually quite reminiscent of Katniss's first experience in the Hunger Games. In a way, it's a cozy read, even though it's so dark and brutal, because there's like those familiar elements that we are all well comfortable with. I will also say, if you have never read the Hunger Games, and for some reason, like a little bit of judgment, but for some reason, if you want to like start the series with this new book, you totally can. I like that Suzanne Collins kind of takes the time and she explains the whole concept to you. So every piece of Hunger Games rule, or like how it functions, how it works, she is explaining that to you again. It also helps if you are particularly bad at remembering what you've read before, which sometimes I am. The Hunger Games are more ingrained in me a little bit more, but you'll see I might make some mistakes here and there when I talk about it. And in those situations, I would say like you could definitely read this book without revisiting the entire series because she will remind you of what's happening. So what I also enjoy leading up to this point, with as little spoilers as possible, is because Haymitch is only one generation above Katniss, you actually get to see a lot of very familiar faces. And again, that's like the cozy nostalgia element, even though it is quite sad because if you read the Hunger Games books, then you technically know the fate of all of these characters. And knowing the series of the Hunger Games, we know that those, you know, endings are often not great. It is like kind of nice to see them in this period of, I wouldn't say like happiness and rest, because they're still quote unquote victims of the Capitol and they're still stuck in the system. But it is nice to see some young faces and understand their backstories and everything like that. Every time like a familiar name pops up, like I get really excited, you know, it's like seeing an old friend. But then you get sad because you realize the old friend is probably dead in the future, brutally. Basically, if you're a fan, you will enjoy this book. It is the perfect kind of prequel to the Hunger Games series. And it does make me think, you know, if Suzanne Collins had more to say about this topic in the world of Panem and the Capitol and all of that, she kind of has an unlimited resource of stories that she could tell, and I would eat all those stories up. I think the games are going to start soon. I'm around 40% of the way done, like I was saying. I'm not surprised they haven't started yet because we'll see that they take it in the same path. I know in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, the story actually continued quite a bit after the games. So I don't know if she'll do the same or not, knowing that, you know, I don't think this is a spoiler, but knowing that Haymitch is around for the original Hunger Games series, he obviously lives to tell the tale. So it's going to be about like, you know, how did it happen and how did he get to the point where he was in Katniss's story. All that to say, I wish I could keep reading this all day, but I do have to go to my volunteering shift. So I'm going to do that first. I'll be back kind of in the late afternoon. And at that point, I will probably just try to finish this book because I don't want to wait anymore. I am impatient and I'm ready for Suzanne Collins to break my heart into tiny little pieces. I don't know if I'll do any more check-ins or if I'm just going to experience it and then check in after, but I will maybe see you on the other side. Witness my first fully non-stick stainless steel pan egg. This is a great start to the day. Welcome to our little floor huddle. It is the next morning, so around just over 24 hours to finish Sunrise and the Reaping, considering all the other stuff that I was trying to do as well. I have my thoughts. I also failed at really vlogging reactions because I finished this book at 3 a.m. last night, so you missed the tears that were streaming down my face. It wasn't a full cry or a sob or anything, you know, just the solitary tears that drift down your face onto the pillow as you're reading. Anyway, what a wonderful story. Let's go over my overall thoughts on Sunrise on the Reaping. In typical format, I'm going to start by talking about pros and the cons, and then talk about some overall thoughts and whether I think that you need to rush to the store right away to buy this book, or if you're good to wait with the library or somewhere else, or however it works for you. So is it a must read now? Is it a must read but take your time, or is it a leave it? Which I think we all know it's not going to be a leave it. Let's get into the overall pros. I've already visited some of it as I was reading the book and checking in. I will mention that this book is a lot more familiar to fans of the original Hunger Games trilogy than it would be compared to The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. This being that haymitch is a character that we see much more in the trilogy, along with the people in his generation of Hunger Games. So you'll see a lot more familiar faces, familiar names, and I really appreciated that. Even knowing the fate of these characters, it was nice to just, you know, get the original cast together and understand a bit more of where all the adults in the story kind of originated from and how they got involved in the whole storyline of Katniss. Without needing to say much about it, because Suzanne Collins delivers every time, this book is so action-packed that I think that's a big reason why it was truly so fast to get through. Even in chapter breaks, like, she's excellent at creating kind of suspenseful points, cliffhangers, and you just want to continue into the chapters to the point where I didn't even notice when I was going into new chapters. So the 2 nights that I stayed up until 2 a.m., 3 a.m., all of that, it was because I would just read, and then at one point I would feel myself, you know, like maybe saying, oh, let's stop reading or something. And I wouldn't even notice that I was on page like 4 of the new chapter or something. So just started. So I would say, okay, let me finish and go to sleep after I finish this chapter. And without meaning to, I would end up in the next chapter. So, like, you know, she's consistently good at delivering action-packed and very fast-paced writing. If you're like me and you're a fan of the Hunger Games series, it is probably because you really appreciate complex characters with diverse motivations. She delivers yet again on that exact style in her writing. I love that all the characters in her book, like haymitch, we all know in Katniss's story, he's like kind of, you know, grumpy, very pessimistic, very jaded, and you can definitely see a little bit of it at the start of his story, but you can see really how his character evolves and ends up in the place that he is when we see him again like 24 years later. Even with haymitch aside, there's characters that come in from previous tributes or current tributes in his games, and even with some of the capital characters that we know from the original series again, where it's wonderful to see how their characters are motivated, what their needs are, what their wants are. And there's a really excellent portion of this that they leverage in the story when they're being coached and mentored, where the mentors kind of say beyond winning the Hunger Games, because they know that only one tribute can win each year, they ask what do they really want to get out of the games? Like, what is their personal goal? For some, it might be they want to go out protecting the people they care for and their loved ones. For others, it may be this is very depressing, but like not suffering through the whole process. And they all have their own motivations. I love that even when there's partnerships that come together in the story and these alliances that form, every character is still intensely self-motivated and have their own self-purpose. It's quite realistic in that sense. Nobody is really a martyr in these cases. Everyone has motivations on their own for their own reasons. Obviously, most people in the end want to survive. For those even in the capital, if their survival is not an issue, they still want to thrive in their careers and in their, you know, trajectory along with their involvement in the Hunger Games. The characters are both in a sense like collaborative and unified, but they're also selfish beings, and that's really just the reality of the world we live in. Overall, what I loved so much about this book is that you can really see that Suzanne Collins does not tell any stories that don't need to be told. This book perfectly ties in what happens in Katniss's story with what happens in Snow's story in The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, and it's like this perfect in-between point that crosses the 2 generations in order to tell you exactly how intergenerationally this whole conclusion came to be and where everything led too. And what I mean by that as well is, especially in Haymitch's story, you can see that we're 50 years into the Hunger Games. People are truly getting sick of sending their kids off to just die in this tournament and in this arena. And there have been many rebellions here and there, but for the most part, the capital holds strong in their control over the districts. And by following Haymitch's perspective, being a tribute in this tournament, you can see him kind of start to see these little pieces here and there that are moving of people who are sick of this status quo and sick of being the oppressed in this system. It really makes your heart ache when you're reading it to understand just how long they were waiting for like a flame like Katniss to come and really wrap the whole rebellion together and bring everyone to the end and to quote unquote triumph, because obviously a lot of tragedies come with that along the way as well. It drove forward just like this feeling of just deep yearning almost for freedom and for escape out of this crazy totalitarian government and controlled state. And it really is unfortunate to see all the characters in Sunrise on the Reaping who have been trying for, you know, at least 24 years at this point, and even further before Haymitch's time, I'm sure, to reach the point where at the end of the Hunger Games trilogy, they do end up being able to turn things over and achieve their goals. And again, with the characters in this too, it adds further to the bloodshed that was required for this level of freedom. So it's a very realistic point of view in, I think, the world and in just how human society operates. It's quite a reflective piece for sure to understand. We have been through a lot of similar transitions, and we are going through a lot of similar transitions currently that just involve huge amounts of bloodshed, conflict, and tragedy in order for oppressed societies to try and regain some control over their own entities and their own beings. Okay, moving to the cons. I do have one con that I want to bring into the story. It is good or it is bad. If you really crave the experience of reading the Hunger Games trilogy for the first time, I think you will enjoy this piece. But for me, I think I was looking forward to something a bit more like different from Katniss' story, and more like, you know, I think Coriolanus Snow's story brought in something new and different, like the perspective of the capital and all of that. Because Haymitch was a tribute in District 12 and being the mentor of Katniss and Peeta, we know that he survived his Hunger Games. The formula of the actual story and the plot was very similar to the original trilogy. So if that's what you're looking for, again, that's good. For me, I think it was a bit formulaic. Like, we follow him from Reaping Day to training to mentors to interviews to all of that until the games, and then he's in the games, people die around him, blah, 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 blah. It was very much recalling the perspective we got from Katniss at the time. This in itself is not a con, but I do think that it is quite reminiscent of the first Hunger Games book in the sense where this is almost like a standalone story, right? So when you get into Catching Fire and Mockingjay, we start getting attached to recurring characters, and we start getting attached to, I'm gonna just bring up, like, for example, like Finnick is a recurring character that everyone is very attached to. Prim, all of these people. When tragedy strikes, when death comes, it is very emotional and it is very like hard hitting. In Haymitch's case, all the story does happen in these, I think it's 400 or so like ish pages. I haven't actually checked. There's not enough time to truly get that emotionally invested in some of the unique characters that only exist in this universe. So obviously you'll meet recurring characters that come up in the future, but the ones that are part of Haymitch's games, his alliances, his friends, I don't think there was too much time for me to develop feelings like emotional attachment to these characters. So when there was like death and destruction, it was sad, but it wasn't devastating. Maybe you don't want something devastating, and that's good. But for me, I was like, oh, like, you know, some characters you get introduced to and you just know like they probably have to die. So I just like didn't get attached, and I kind of expected when they died. And you know, it depends on the point of the story and what you're trying to get out of it. I think it was just the results of having a standalone Haymitch book, and there's clearly not enough time to get a lot of recurring characters in. Makes sense. Just one small con. Overall, yes, I did cry at the ending. I genuinely wasn't expecting to, because by the time I finished like the full body of this book and before the epilogue, I just like kind of saw it as a story that wrapped together and brought us to the conclusion of Haymitch becoming who he was at the time that he met Katniss and Peeta. But the epilogue really hit hard. It was really beautiful. It wasn't even like a sad cry. It was like just truly like, it would bring back like this feeling of both like warmth, comfort, but true like sadness for everything the characters had gone through. I think it was crucial in tying everything together and visiting this story of the Hunger Games, of the capital, of this, you know, Panem universe from beginning to end across generations. I really enjoyed little details that she put in across these generations as well, showing, this gets a little like detailed, but showing class impact on lifespan and quality of life, because I think it's really interesting how Lucy Gray, who was the first victor from District 12 at the time when Coriolanus Snow was her mentor in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, she is referenced briefly in this book as an unknown District 12 tribute who won the game. So she's really erased from history, and nobody in District 12 even knows too much about her, because I think by the time Haymitch is here, people from her generation no longer are alive. But we still see that Coriolanus Snow is here and thriving. He's going to be here when Katniss is also in the games. He is still very much alive and well. And I think that's, again, just the representation, the little details that matter about how it's crazy that Coriolanus Snow kind of lives through this whole timeline and this whole tale, while in the poor areas, in the oppressed areas, they've already cycled through like 3 or 4 generations of people just from having short lifespans. I'm getting too much in the details. Overall, the motivations of this book all tie together very well through Suzanne Collins' own words in her acknowledgements at the end of The Sunrise on the Reaping, where she says, "To all my wonderful readers, thanks for once again returning to Panem and investing in these characters and their struggles, even when you know the eventual outcome. The snow may fall, but the sun also rises." This is why I think people come back over and over again to these Hunger Games books. It's a sense of this representation of the bleakness of reality and the darkness behind human emotion, psychology, and society, but this also hopeful feeling of how eventually we may always end up figuring things out and striking these little moments of peace and balance here and there. And ultimately, that's what her stories really mean to me. So where do I think things will go next? There are a few pieces that I do think about in the remaining Hunger Games universe. I'm probably just feeling really like Snoopy and like up in people's business, but I do think Coriolanus Snow's story is still left quite unexplored. In the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, we got a glimpse of his character arc when he is young, going through a very turbulent romantic experience, and the turning point in which he, between choosing between good and evil, he chooses evil. But even in the moment in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes when he chooses evil, there is that piece missing between him going to the dark side and him showing up in Haymitch and Katniss's book as like this psycho crazy dude who's like just ruthless and merciless when it comes to killing people, destroying people, and, you know, going after everything that people care about. It really makes you think about the connecting story piece on where he kind of ends up as a peacekeeper to becoming the most powerful man in Panem. So I would always be curious about that. I'm also okay if we never learn that, because I do appreciate kind of like the mystery behind these fictional universes and these unknowns that honestly probably only the author has, and I really respect that. So it would be good, but I also don't need it, but I would love to know because I just want to know the tea. I also saw a really interesting theory from Reddit. I will put a screenshot of the person who posted it. Obviously, after reading this book, I immediately was like, okay, give me more Hunger Games. Like, I want more books. Again, if there are no more books, I'm a person who's like, I will leave it to the creator to tell me when things are done and when enough is enough. So I will respect Suzanne Collins for that decision. However, this Redditor had a very interesting theory about how her prequels may be mirroring somewhat the original trilogy. What they bring in here is that they think that Katniss is really the igniting character in the main trilogy, obviously, while they think Snow is the igniting character in the overall Panem arc, which makes a lot of sense. So they say that the first book, Hunger Games, matches the Ballad of the Songbirds and Snakes, so we both follow the main characters as they get thrown into this world. They say that the book with Haymitch matches Catching Fire because it is a lot of the experience of going to the games and in some levels being able to, after experience of watching the games a lot and being mentored by people, you try to kind of like play things to your knowledge and try to fight back a little bit against the game makers and against the Capitol and Panem. It does feel a little bit like the ignition and the starting point of a rebellion as well. So it has those similar features of Catching Fire. So what they propose that is quite interesting is with Mockingjay, way, this is when the full war and the full battle kind of breaks out between the 2 or 3, honestly, opposing sides. In that sense, there's an interesting take on how perhaps there's stories missing from the dark days of the first rebellion that led to the start of the Hunger Games. I don't know if I want to read that story, because I think that is going to be the truly tragic story that leads to this, you know, almost century-long bloodshed of like children being sent to these games, of their families and generations being impacted by this like brutal and horrific event. But it is a very interesting theory to think about, and I will be thinking about it for a while. We won't know what Suzanne Collins decides to do until she either announces something or just leaves things as is, but food for thought. I read it and I thought it was interesting, so I want you all to just kind of get in on that. Okay, all that to say, I am aware this wasn't the most cohesive review of a book, because I think I just blacked out, read it all very fast, and then came and started filming with like the bare minimum of points written down. I would love to hear your thoughts. If you do, leave a comment. Let's try to keep it spoiler free, because I think there are just so many spoilers out there already. And that leads me into answering a few questions. So what would I rate this book? I think I would actually give it like a 4.5 or 4.75. You'll see what I finalize it to on my storygraph. I'm going back and forth. I don't think it was a full 5-star for me though, but ultimately it was like exactly what I wanted from this book at the same time. Would I recommend you go buy this book right away? There are 2 ways to look at it. If you are me, then yes, I would recommend you go buy it, because from what I hear, luckily I'm a little bit unplugged from the internet these days, but I hear that spoilers are rampant and they are everywhere. If you're like me and you want to experience everything organically with the story real time as you're reading it, then just go get it, because you cannot, I don't think you can avoid spoilers for much longer unless you're also quite unplugged from social media. Then you might be able to wait. If you don't mind seeing a few stray spoilers here and there, then I don't think you need to rush to read this piece. You can even save it for like a rainy day where you're looking for something familiar to read, because it does quite feel like a nice Hunger Games reread with new characters and new stories. And I think that's kind of like a nice piece of comfort reading with still a new plot and the unknown factors that can come with it. Both sides work. Run to the store if you're scared of spoilers. Take your time if you're kind of neutral and you don't really care. There's nothing like you're immediately missing out on right now. I hope you enjoyed this reading vlog. I really enjoyed making it. We're gonna wait for other books to release and read them together as well. The next book that's coming out, I'm also insanely excited for, is gonna be the new Emily Henry book. So look out for my reading vlog then. In between, I'll obviously continue posting my normal content as well. Thanks so much for joining. Please let me know what your thoughts are, because I'm still so scrambled on what I just processed, what I went through with haymitch, this whole story, this whole experience. I'm overwhelmed. I would love to hear your thoughts, because I also need to get my thoughts together too. With that, I will see you all next time. Thanks for joining me. Goodbye.